Behind the velvet curtains of royal palaces, where whispers turned into secrets and passion often masked danger, some rulers revealed their darkest sides, not on the battlefield, but in their own chambers. These were monarchs whose private lives became theaters of cruelty, betrayal, and blood. From queens who killed their lovers in fits of rage, to kings who executed their wives without mercy, history's most intimate royal spaces often hid its most terrifying horrors. Stay tuned, because what happened behind closed doors will shock you more than any war or conquest. At number 10, we are drawn into the turbulent world of the Ming Dynasty, where Emperor Zhengde of China reigned with an unsettling mixture of folly and menace. Known for his eccentric obsessions, this monarch blurred the boundaries between fantasy and reality, even going so far as to create an imaginary alter ego, General Zhu Shou, to whom he issued formal imperial decrees. Yet beneath this bizarre exterior lay a darkness far more terrifying than whimsical play acting. For the first 5 years of his reign, he entrusted crucial state affairs to his favorite eunuch, Liu Jin, a man who wielded enormous influence within the Forbidden City. Their alliance initially appeared unshakable, but when suspicions and resentments crept in, Zhengde's response was chilling. Instead of a clean dismissal or a quick execution, the emperor ordered Liu Jin to endure the gruesome punishment of lingqi, the infamous slow slicing. Over the course of 2 unbearable days, Liu's body was methodically mutilated, his death stretched out as both entertainment and warning. This was not a public act of justice, but an intimate display of vengeance, inflicted upon a man once considered a confidant. It revealed a monarch whose instability transformed loyalty into a death sentence, and whose private quarters became theaters of cruelty. Zhengde's reign is remembered not only for his erratic military expeditions and reckless amusements, but also for the haunting reality that those closest to his bedchamber lived under constant threat of betrayal, humiliation, and unimaginable suffering at the hands of an unpredictable tyrant. At number 9, we descend into the shadowy courts of 15th century Naples, where King Ferrante turned cruelty into an art form unlike any monarch before him. While many rulers relied on executions or exile to neutralize rivals, Ferrante devised a more sinister method, one that haunted the very walls of his palace. Rather than merely disposing of his enemies, he had their bodies embalmed and preserved, creating a grotesque private gallery of corpses. This so-called museum of mummified enemies was hidden within his chambers, and only select visitors, often nobles suspected of wavering loyalty, were escorted inside. Imagine standing before the lifeless, desiccated remains of those who once defied him, their hollow eyes fixed in eternal submission. This was not simply a macabre collection, but a chilling psychological weapon. A silent reminder that defiance ended in more than death. It led to eternal display as a trophy of failure. His palace became a labyrinth of fear, where banquets and councils carried the invisible weight of the dead looking on. This act of intimate intimidation blurred hospitality with horror, leaving guests unsettled long after they departed. Ferrante's grotesque display ensured obedience not through public spectacle but through private dread, embedding terror directly into the heart of his home. His cruelty, lingering in the embalmed faces of defeated rivals, served as a nightmarish testament that crossing the king meant becoming part of his personal gallery, where humiliation outlasted life itself. At number 8, we move to the fractured Frankish kingdoms of the 6th century, where King Chilperic I earned the chilling reputation of being a husband as dangerous as he was ambitious. His marriage to Galswinthe, a Visigothic princess, was meant to strengthen alliances and bring a rich dowry into his realm. In exchange, he promised to dismiss his many lovers and concubines, most notably the cunning and ruthless Fredegund, his longtime mistress. Yet old desires proved stronger than new vows. Galswinthe, finding herself humiliated by her husband's blatant infidelity, begged to return to her homeland in Spain. But a queen in early medieval Europe could not simply walk away from a royal marriage. Within weeks, her pleas ended in tragedy. She was discovered strangled in her own bedchamber, the intimate setting of her marital vows transformed into the stage for her murder. All fingers pointed to Chilperic, whose motive was undeniable, especially as he married Fredegund just 3 days later. This act of cruelty was not merely personal, but catastrophic for the kingdom. Galswinthe's death ignited a bitter blood feud between the Frankish and Visigothic dynasties, sparking a civil war that lasted decades and scarred generations. Behind the closed doors of a royal chamber, a single act of spousal violence became the catalyst for 40 years of political instability, betrayal, and bloodshed. Chilperic's Cruelty shows how, for queens of this era, the marital bed could be as perilous as the battlefield, and love could swiftly turn into a death sentence when a king's ambition and lust collided. At number 7, we journey to 19th century Madagascar, where Queen Renovalona I carved her legacy with fire, blood, and fear. Rising to power after the death of her husband, she secured her throne by ruthlessly eliminating rivals, including her mother-in-law and several close relatives. But her cruelty was not confined to politics. It seeped into the most private corners of her life. Ranavalona's court was ruled not only by paranoia, but by her explosive temper. And nowhere was this more terrifying than in her own bedchambers. Fiercely possessive and jealous, she tolerated no disobedience and no betrayal. The most infamous episode came when she discovered her lover with another woman. In a moment of raw, unfiltered rage, she seized a spear and thrust it into his neck, killing him instantly. This was not a calculated execution, nor a political maneuver. It was a queen acting out of pure, personal fury. Her chambers, which should have been sanctuaries of intimacy, became arenas of sudden death, where even passion carried the risk of fatal punishment. Those who sought closeness to Renovalona lived under the constant shadow of fear, never certain whether a whisper of suspicion or a flicker of jealousy might end their lives. The fatal stabbing of her lover remains a chilling reminder that in the world of absolute monarchy, private desire and political terror were inseparably intertwined. Ranavalona's reign, marked by thousands of public deaths, also extended its terror into her most intimate relationships, proving that in her kingdom, no one, whether relative, rival, or lover, was safe from her wrath. At number 6, we turn to ancient Rome, where Emperor Gaius Caligula redefined cruelty within both politics and the private sphere. His reign began with promises of moderation, but within months, his court became a carnival of excess and terror. Caligula's personal life was consumed by sexual depravity, none more shocking than his incestuous affairs with his own sisters, flaunted shamelessly before horrified senators and nobles. The imperial palace became a theater of scandal, where taboo was not simply broken but weaponized as proof of his power. Yet his cruelty went beyond carnal indulgence. Consumed by paranoia, Caligula viewed family members not as allies, but as obstacles. He poisoned his cousin, executed cousins and senators on a whim, and even eliminated his grandmother, transforming his home into a palace of perpetual betrayal. His acts were not calculated strategies for stability, but eruptions of sadistic control, in which suspicion and desire justified every cruelty. Courtiers and kin alike lived in a nightmare where a gesture of affection could be twisted into evidence of treachery, and where loyalty was rewarded with humiliation, exile, or death. In Caligula's Rome, the boundaries of morality disintegrated under the weight of unchecked imperial power. His bedchambers, meant to be sanctuaries of intimacy, became sites of incest, manipulation, and terror, while his dining halls rang with the cries of those condemned at his whim. Few rulers in history so perfectly embodied the fusion of madness, lust, and blood as Caligula, whose reign revealed how absolute authority could corrupt not just the empire, but the most private sanctuaries of family and love. At number 5, we descend into the oppressive court of 19th century Spain, where King Ferdinand VII ruled not only his kingdom, but his wives with suffocating cruelty. Described by contemporaries as a slug of a man, Ferdinand combined laziness with a venomous paranoia that destroyed every bond of trust within his household. He married 4 times, including 2 nieces and a cousin, yet each wife endured years of suspicion, humiliation, and psychological torment. Unlike monarchs who relied on physical brutality, Ferdinand's weapon was relentless mistrust, twisting even innocent actions into signs of betrayal. When Queen Maria Cristina requested to redecorate her chambers, he accused her of planning secret hiding places for assassins or poisons. If a courtier complimented her gown, Ferdinand raged that it was a coded message to conspirators. Even her prayers were framed as treasonous communications with foreign powers. Within his palace, every word, every glance, every gesture could be distorted into evidence of a plot. His cruelty was not flamboyant spectacle, but an invisible poison, eroding the minds and spirits of those trapped near him. Wives who should have been partners became prisoners in a cage of suspicion, forced to live under the constant threat of slander and reprisal. Ferdinand's reign illustrates how paranoia, when amplified by absolute power, can create a tyranny far more intimate than executions or wars. His cruelty lived not in blood-soaked chambers, but in the slow, suffocating destruction of trust and love, proving that royal power could be just as deadly when it crushed the soul instead of the body. At number 4, we meet Wu Zetian, the only woman to ever rule China outright as emperor, a figure whose rise was fueled by ambition so fierce it consumed even her closest kin. Beginning her life in the palace as a concubine, Wu refused to remain confined to the shadows of power. To eliminate her rivals, she allegedly committed one of history's most chilling acts, smothering her own infant daughter in her crib, then framing Empress Wang for the crime. This monstrous deed cleared the way for Wu to displace the reigning empress and claim the throne for herself. But her cruelty did not stop there. Once Wang was toppled, Wu ordered a punishment that embodied both humiliation and sadism. Her hands and feet were hacked off, and she was left to drown in a vat of wine. Wu continued her ruthless purge, poisoning her own mother, executing siblings, and systematically eradicating anyone who might challenge her supremacy. What makes Wu's story so chilling is the way she weaponized the most sacred of family bonds, motherhood, sisterhood, daughterhood, as tools for her relentless climb. The imperial bedchamber, which should have been a place of nurture and intimacy, became a site of manipulation, betrayal, and unimaginable violence. Her reign, though marked by political achievements and reforms, is eternally shadowed by the blood she shed in her most private spaces, proving that in her quest for the throne, no bond was sacred, no life untouchable, and no crime too monstrous if it secured her grip on power. At number 3, we enter the stormy reign of Ivan IV of Russia, remembered forever as the Terrible, not only for his ruthless campaigns of public terror, but for the horrors he inflicted upon his own family behind Kremlin walls. Ivan's marriages were short-lived, many of his wives poisoned, imprisoned, or simply discarded in fits of paranoia. But the darkest chapter unfolded within his private chambers when his pregnant daughter-in-law, Yelena Sheremeteva, fell victim to his uncontrollable rage. Outraged at what he deemed her immodest clothing, Ivan struck her violently, causing a miscarriage that shattered the royal household. When his heir, Ivan Ivanovich, rushed to defend her, the Tsar turned on his son with his iron-tipped staff. In a frenzy of fury, he struck blow after blow until the young man lay fatally wounded. The death of his beloved heir plunged Ivan into brief, unbearable grief, but the damage was irreversible. This was no cold political assassination, but a horrifying eruption of domestic violence, born from paranoia and cruelty that extinguished his dynasty's brightest future. Within his bedchambers and family halls, love and protection were twisted into suspicion and violence, transforming home into a battlefield. Ivan's story is a stark reminder of how absolute power, when fused with mental instability and substance-driven delusion, can erupt in acts of brutality that scar not just a dynasty, but the soul of a nation. The very rooms that should have nurtured family bonds instead became monuments to fear, rage, and bloodshed. At number 2, we arrive in Tudor England, where King Henry VIII turned marriage itself into a weapon of tyranny. His desperation for a male heir consumed his private life, reducing his 6 wives to pawns in a deadly game of succession. His obsession with Anne Boleyn, in particular, revealed his chilling cruelty. Henry sabotaged her betrothal, pursued her relentlessly, and coerced her into marriage despite her resistance. Yet when Anne failed to give him the son he desired, love swiftly turned to lethal disdain. He accused her of adultery, incest, and treason, charges fueled more by paranoia than truth, and sent her to the scaffold at the Tower of London. Just years later, Catherine Howard, his much younger 5th wife, suffered the same fate, executed after accusations of immorality, though her past suggests she was more victim than traitor. Henry's private chambers became revolving doors of queens, each entering with hope and leaving under the shadow of terror. His wives endured psychological torment, constant surveillance, and the ever-present threat of execution if they failed in their singular duty, bearing a son. The cruelty of Henry's bedchamber was not in sudden outbursts, but in systemic, calculated destruction, where the intimacy of marriage masked the deadly risk of royal disfavor. Few rulers better illustrate how patriarchal power weaponized intimacy, turning queens into disposable victims of dynastic obsession, and making the Tudor bedchamber a site of both passion and fatal judgment. Number 1. Reigning above all in cruelty, we find Elizabeth Bathory, the infamous Blood Countess of Hungary. whose name has become legend for the horrors she unleashed within her castles. Born into wealth and power, she married Count Ferenc Nodesty, who reportedly tutored her in the art of torture, gifting her spiked gloves to use on servants. After his death, Bathory's sadism escalated to monstrous heights. Between 1585 and 1610, she is believed to have tortured and killed hundreds of girls, with estimates soaring as high as 650 victims. Behind closed doors, her bedchambers became chambers of agony. She forced pins under fingernails, flogged victims until flesh tore, burned them with hot irons, and in some cases bit chunks of flesh from their bodies. Legends claim she bathed in their blood, seeking eternal youth. Though her cruelty required no supernatural excuse, it was the unbridled indulgence of sadism within the safety of her private estates. For years, her noble rank shielded her from consequences, but when she began targeting daughters of the aristocracy, her crimes could no longer be ignored. She was finally arrested and walled up within her own castle, left to die in the darkness she had once used to hide her crimes. Elizabeth Bathory's atrocities reveal how unchecked privilege and power, when fused with psychological depravity, could transform intimate royal spaces into theaters of unimaginable horror. The bedchamber, meant for rest and passion, became in her hands a dungeon of death, sealing her place as the most terrifying figure in the history of cruel monarchs. The stories of these 10 rulers prove that history's darkest cruelties were not always written on battlefields, but within the private sanctuaries of royal power. Behind the locked doors of palaces, paranoia, lust, and ambition turned bedchambers into arenas of torment, betrayal, and death. These legacies remind us that unchecked authority, hidden from scrutiny, can twist love into fear and intimacy into horror. If you found this journey into the shadows of royalty as haunting as we did, don't forget to comment your thoughts, hit that like button, and subscribe for more dark tales from history. Thanks for watching.